What should we make of the parable of Saad Gabr, the wealthy and mysterious Arab businessman who appeared in the eastern townships in the mid-70s, began purchasing millions of dollars of real estate in downtown Sherbrooke, and most notably in the sleepy village of North Hatley, then abruptly vanished? Dubbed the Sheik of Massawippi, Gabr built a multi-million-dollar palatial home locals called Baghdad sur le Lac and Gabr Mosque. Gabr once told the Wall Street Journal that he wanted to turn North Hatley into a high-tech business center. But later, in an interview with Radio Canada, he revealed that his real motivation lay 40 kilometers away in Highwater, Quebec, the border town straddling Canada and the U.S. Gabr was fascinated by the equally enigmatic Gerald Bull. Bull was believed to have been assassinated by the Israeli Mossad in 1990, and his Space Research Corporation, once a pipe dream for Canada getting into the advanced military weapons game, but by the 1980s long mothballed and returned to grass fields and crumbling concrete. Gabr told Radio Canada he wanted to acquire Bull's long gun technology to, quote, shoot down satellites that were spying on him and his friends. But the Canadian government had long suspected Gabr's ultimate goal was to sell the technology to interests in the Middle East, and may have run him out of the country. He disappeared in 1987, abandoning all his properties and leaving a trail of unpaid property tax bills. Others speculated that Gabr chose North Hatley to establish a safe haven in the West. The Middle East had become increasingly unstable, and he and his friends didn't want to end up like the Shah of Iran, on the run without a home. All of this is to say, in case you haven't noticed, we've now come full circle back to where we started, with a military aircraft crashing through Lake Memphremagog that may have had clandestine connections to some secret mission involving Gerald Bull and his abandoned research facility that stood just 15 kilometers away as the crow flies in Highwater. A little roundabout, I know, but this is my attempt at landing a plane before you learn to fly it. This is Who Killed Teresa. I am less interested in Gabr's North Hatley connections, and more intrigued by his one-time downtown Sherbrooke real estate holdings. In 1982, Gabr purchased the Auberge de Gouverneurs Hotel and two Wellington Street office buildings at the corner of Wellington and Frontenac, the former home of a Steinberg's grocery store. The Egyptian-born businessman began constructing an Islamic institute. Or was it a technology center? As long as the money was flowing, Mayor Jacques O'Brady was sure not to ask too many questions. By 1983, things got ugly when local hotelier and North Hatley councilman Robert Gagnon accused Gabr of deliberately setting out to lower property values by allowing buildings to deteriorate, and calling him an international arms dealer. Gabr threatened legal action. He was already suing La Tribune, so what's another million? But what did that matter anyway? Local developers lined up with countersuits, with the cities of both Sherbrooke and Montreal joining the fray with unpaid tax disputes. The tale of Saad Gabr smacks of more than a little township xenophobia. The wealthy Molsons and Brothmans and Donald Sutherlands love to live here unnoticed. It's fine when Hillary and Bill roll up at Manoir Hovey in their Chevy Suburban motorcade, or Johnny Depp summers in Ayers Cliff, but don't dare call attention to your celebrity. Everyone is so Tony until your community winds up on the headlines. Gabr was not only an outsider, an Egyptian-born Moroccan, For the townships, that was way outside. He committed the unforgivable offense of calling attention to the region by regularly having his name in the papers. Like Gabber, I too am a township's social pariah, condemned to carry into the region the scarlet stank branding of murder and serial killer. By the end of 1984, Gabber was forced to abandon his dream of an Islamic technology center in the heart of downtown and prepared to sell the property to the city of Sherbrooke. The deal was controversial, to say the least, with opponents deeming the sale price of $1.3 million above market. The city couldn't afford it and was planning a special bond referendum to put taxpayers on the hook for a 15-year term loan, further inflating the cost to $1.6 million. Fortunately, this deal never went through. The Quebec government seized the property for unpaid debts, and Gabber was eventually forced to sell the building to a Virginian businessman for $910,000. What irked local merchants the most was that for years they had been planning to revitalize downtown Sherbrooke with their own Place Hôtel de Ville project that included a cultural center. It had taken them a decade to develop the strategy, with the local Chamber of Commerce only coming on board in 1979. Now these efforts were swept away by the city council in a fait accompli with the arrival of some foreigner and his handful of magic beans and promises that appeared anything but strategic and at its worst seemed delusional. Vilify sad Gabber to your heart's content, but the point is, who owned the Wellington properties prior to his purchase? People like Yvon Charland and the Lachance brothers, or cops who had speculated on burned-out buildings destroyed in an arson job that most likely had their hand in it. Wasn't this the same downtown business district formerly torched on a regular basis, in a town where arson reached its apex in 1978? And why do anything about it when the police's chief arson investigator, Normand Plourde, was in on the game? It's a classic case of manipulating police resources to crash land values. Buy, then sell at a profit. Don't follow sad Gabber. Follow the money. A lot of people got wealthy off those burned out properties. Just how far could arson corruption possibly extend in Sherbrooke? Consider the story of Enquête Spécialisée, a private detective agency started in 1999 by 3 retired cops, Tom McConnell, Réal Chateauneuf, and Patrick Hall. 2 of them you know. Chateauneuf was the SQ agent who set up the arson entrapment of Jean Charland at the Aloha Motel. Patrick Hall was the lead detective on the raid at Disco Bob's. In fact, it was Chateauneuf who found the piece of paper on Raymond Grimard's body with the phone number Tricia Hall or Patrick Hall, more than likely planted evidence that led to the false arrest of Fernand Laplante. According to McConnell, he got the idea to start a private investigation firm because of his, quote, realization that potential clients had to call on outside investigators because police weren't available. Asked to explain this anomaly of why people wouldn't simply go to the police, the 3 amigos replied that they considered the police a complement to their work. In addition to providing assistance with missing persons or the location of property, Enquête Spécialisée's real expertise came in the area of, wait for it, insurance fraud. Last year, we saved the insurance companies some $25,000 in unfounded or overpaid claims. We also do a lot of work with factories or industries, particularly with the issue of in-house theft. That's Tom McConnell. It's sort of like the fox guarding the henhouse, isn't it? McConnell had been the head of public affairs at the SQ. Like Michel Letellier, he did a stint at Sherbrooke University teaching police procedure before embarking on this private investigation enterprise. In the article, La Tribune reporter Pierre Saint-Jacques gushed on about how local police were really like celebrities. "We must admit that these men and women of the SQ, who occupy this function of link between the patrol officers, the investigating officers, in short, between the police organization and the media, become in time as well known as the stars of the small screen." It's Pierre Saint-Jacques. My simple question would be, when should a cop ever be a celebrity? But it's true. I've known more retired cops who look back on their careers as if they were Serpico, when in fact they were more like the Paul Blart Mall cop of their era. I know one guy who compares himself to the lone Ronin standing up for the Montreal community during the tumult of the late 1960s. The only police officer I ever knew who was entrenched in the shit of policing in the biker wars of Operation Carcajou looked more like Mr. Peabody, and that's sort of the point. The real Serpicos don't call attention to themselves or their work. They go about their jobs with a quiet dignity, and you never see their names or pictures in the papers. Roch Gaudreault, he of the fabricated evidence, who perjured himself in the Michel Bellet case, also joined Enquête Spécialisée upon his retirement with the SQ. All through his career, Gaudreault was treated like a celebrity in La Tribune's Carnet King Wellington, the local Hedda Hopper-esque gossip column of the day. Here's a sample from 1984. "Even if his co-workers claim the contrary, it seems that Corporal Roch Gaudreault is all the rage with his salt and pepper beard. So much so that he has refused until now to put the razor to it. I am expecting to receive a petition of 1,000 names suggesting that it be kept." Ho, 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 ho. For fuck's sakes. There are bon mots about Roch joining the celebrity half marathon and how he once tried for hours to retrieve an envelope he accidentally dropped in a Canada Post box. How in the 1970s he comically had to make several attempts to install an above-ground swimming pool at his residence, and how the young SQ officer once spent, quote, 3 days and 3 nights bailing out his luxurious finished basement which had suffered in a flood. Wait a minute. Swimming pools and luxury basements? How does a junior officer afford that? Far from being punished for their investigative failures, these officers were rewarded for their years of failed service. In 1984, Roch Gaudreault received the Police Exemplary Service Medal from the Governor-General of Canada. Réal Chateauneuf received the honor in 1986. Patrick Hall and Jacques Filion from the Carole Fecteau case, by the way, this is the 44th anniversary of her unsolved murder, in 1985. And Noel Bolduc, who was the lead on the Grimard and Bergeron investigation in 1988. If you go to the website theresaallore.com, theresaallore.com, you can find a link to those listings of Police Exemplary Service Medals from the Governor-General of Canada. Yeah, I got one myself. I got 2, in fact. One from the Governor-General, one from the Canadian Senate, which just goes to show you, the nature of medals and, naming legislation after victims or people. It's all a crock of shit, people. It really is. It's just it's a way of co-opting your voice. That's all. That's all that game is about. I've provided a long list of Corporal Roch Gaudreault's investigative shortcomings. There's no need to go over that again. I will say that recently, the current SQ has begun to plow old ground in my sister's case kind of invoking the memory of Gaudreault, bringing up long dismissed theories in what I think is actually an attempt to gaslight and scorch any recent progress that has been made. For instance, they brought up the old notion that Chemin de la Compton area, where Therese's body was found, may not be the actual dump site, suggesting that her body may have traveled in the water where she was found. The notion is absurd, people. It's a horseshoe-shaped body of water. It's approximately 1,000 feet end to end. It is essentially a landlocked drainage ditch. It does not flow into any other tributary. The SQ then gave me this long story of how they once had a case where a body traveled down the Francois River through dams and locks until it reached the St. Lawrence, where by the time it reached the St. Lawrence, all the clothing had come off. And their point was simple: my Therese's clothing have come off in the water. Again, 1,000 feet, landlocked for most of the year. The horseshoe is dry. The Sûreté de Québec is spinning in retrograde, going back to the days of Roch Gaudreault's suggestion that wild dogs carried Therese's wallet 16 kilometers and precisely and efficiently deposited it at the side of a gravel road next to an apple orchard. When I met with detectives last December in Boucherville, there was some small talk before we began our meeting. One of the guys was talking about how he'd done his undergraduate studies at the University of Montreal, and the other guy offered that he had studied at the University of Sherbrooke. He then asked me rather pointedly, "Do you know who taught me police procedure there?" Except that I didn't let him finish. Mid-sentence, I just stated flatly, Roch Gaudreault. Everyone got real quiet after that. After 6 months of reporting on the saga of Sherbrooke and the Lachance brothers, when it was time for the SQ to step up and do their part, they threw me to the wolves. Far from stepping in and actively investigating, I was told to contact police in the US, or, quote, maybe your lawyer, Monsieur Rancourt, could guide you. No matter. I trumped that. I'm an American citizen. I contacted the FBI. The FBI don't fuck around. The FBI won't be bullied and bribed by some rural Canadian underworld. In the wake of the publication of Wish You Were Here, a lot of people with ties to this story were gone. My father and one-time chief suspect for the police, Ian Catterall, and Terry Roth, a close friend of Therese's, all died within months. Leo Hamel, the Lennoxville police chief who was co-lead on that raid at Disco Bob's, the one authority figure who seemed to be aware of what was really going on at the time and had an unsettled conscience about it, died a little over a year ago. Leo and I had arranged to meet prior to his death at his home in Montreal, but he went deaf before we could get together. He literally lost his ability to hear. What Leo heard and may have had to tell remains a mystery. Patrick Hall died much earlier in 2013 in a head-on collision on a Quebec auto route north of Sherbrooke. An accident, but in the version I've been told, Hall deliberately steered his vehicle into oncoming traffic. There are a few other loose ends worth mentioning. In 2000, Mother of five, Lynn Roch, was charged in the stabbing death of José Lestage in an apartment on Sherbrooke's Rue Papineau. Police found Roch hiding out at the Paysan Motel in Lennoxville and believed the murder was the result of a love triangle which centered on Roch's husband. What La Tribune, or any newspaper, failed to mention was that the cheating husband was Gerald Lachance. More riddles. What should we make of the murder of Hélène Dussault, the young sister of Fernand Laplante's marriage of convenience wife Claire Dussault? In early August 1988, Hélène Dussault was visiting Claire, who by this time was living in Ottawa. On her way back to Sherbrooke, she dropped in on another sister, France, who was living in Montreal. On Monday morning, August 8th, 26-year-old Hélène Dussault was discovered in the backyard of a Montreal police detective's house in the fashionable Parc Maisonneuve district on Rue Vieux. She had been strangled with her clothing, then dragged onto the sergeant detective's property. Missing were her purse and identity papers. Another sister, Manon, committed suicide in 1979, jumping out of an apartment window. In mid-October 1984, a joint task force comprised of the SQ and a Montreal SWAT team raided the Jetons Lennoxville clubhouse. Presumably this was the Hells Angels bunker, in an event that appeared to anticipate the violence and mass murder that would unfold there just 5 months later with the assassination of 5 North Chapter members. In conjunction with this raid, the Sûreté Québec and the Lennoxville police busted a property on Dunant Street in the Belvedere Heights area in South Sherbrooke, yielding illegal weapons, drugs, money, and $130,000 in stolen jewelry. There they also found 26-year-old Louise Legault, living like, quote, an abused prisoner in a makeshift dungeon. Police describing her plight as living like a sex slave. All of this means that the problems born from the early days of the bikers of Sherbrooke and the biker priest Father Jean Salvé, of Boboy Beaulieu and the Dirty Reich, and the Night of the Long Knives never really went away. They just stood dormant for a time and moved underground. The logical thing for police to do at this point would be to go to Sherbrooke and question people. Not just people who knew Régis Lachance, but former police officers, especially former police officers. Many are dead, but I believe Noel Bolduc, Jacques Filion, Réal Chateauneuf, and Roch Gaudreault are very much alive. But the modern Sûreté de Québec will never do this because for the past 18 years, their cold case efforts have been nothing but a dumb show. They are a demonstration of police investigation, not actual investigating. But let's be honest, they were never going to give me what I really wanted. My approach would have been to burn the whole thing down and start over from scratch. Don't just question the brave people who came forward in this tale. Interrogate, then prosecute police. Scorch the earth. Who would ever do that? Who is truly appreciative that I have bothered to dig up all these old ghost stories in the first place? No one ever thanked Thomas Stockman for informing the town that the community well was poisoned. The proof is in the paralysis. Sherbrooke's local newspaper, La Tribune, has been aware of this affair for months. Like you, each week I've been providing updates to the senior editors of the papers. At first I was acknowledged and told they would get back with me. When the story got messy and presented a bad message about the town, they became silent. No ink has been spilled in this affair, which is undoubtedly local news. I'd say a little more important than whether or not there'll be fireworks at this week's Fête Nationale, but then I'm not the editor. fireworks are important too. Why can't it be both? Why must it be either or? One thing is certain. I've had my say, laid out my message. As safe as eggs, I'll not be returning to Quebexico. This is Who Killed Teresa. If you like the podcast, please go to the website teresaallore.com, teresaallore.com, where you can follow us on social media. There are links there to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Substack, YouTube. Follow along, comment. I'd love to hear any of your comments on the Quebexico series, what you thought about it, where you'd like us to go next. Deeply, deeply appreciated. The book Wish You Were Here is now on sale in Canada and the US. I love The Last of the Independents, the bookstores, but the most practical thing to do is to buy it online. You can buy Wish You Were Here by John Allore and Patricia Pearson at Amazon, Walmart, Target.com. That's all for today. This has been Who Killed Teresa. I'm your host, John Allore. Have yourselves a great, great